I chose the lectionary selection that Bobby just read from Jeremiah because it has the word heart in it. Since Valentine's Day is tomorrow, I thought it a happy coincidence that it'd be interesting to explore a biblical heart on Valentine's Day, or near Valentine's Day. And it turns out that to do that, I need to start off with a very brief bit of history on Valentine's Day and the meaning of hearts. Valentine's Day is actually a very old holiday with even older roots. It was first put on the Christian calendar in 496 AD to honor a martyr from the 3rd century known as St. Valentine of Rome. It was also used to replace a mid-February pagan holiday called Lupercalia that had been celebrated in Rome for hundreds of years. The Lupercalia holiday seems to have had some connection to coupling and fertility, but Valentine's Day itself was not clearly connected to romantic love until the 14th century. And by then, Valentine's Day was linked to romance and love, and has remained so. Long before Valentine's Day existed, hearts were associated with love in Western culture. The connection started way back in ancient Greece and continued through ancient Rome right up to today. The heart's connection to love is such a pervasive idea in the West that even though we now know the heart is a muscle that pumps blood, not emotions, our minds continue to link the heart to love and to feelings. When we see an I heart Jesus bumper sticker, we do not think it means I muscle Jesus, right? We know it means I love Jesus. That's the brief history of Valentine's Day and the connection of the hearts. And because of that history, we pretty much automatically think the word heart used in non-physiological context connotes love and emotions. Valentine's Day. And so chances are that when Jeremiah refers to the heart being deceitful and sick and searched by God, we probably strongly link it to emotions or feelings or lack thereof. That's actually too narrow an understanding of heart for biblical reading. You see, Jeremiah was written in the ancient Near East, not in the West. In the ancient Near East, writings like the Bible, hearts are linked to more than love and emotions. I have this big old multi-volume New Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, and it notes the distinction and how it matters. Here's what it says. Unlike Western cultures, which primarily associated the heart with feelings and emotions, Near Eastern cultures emphasized its role in thinking, reasoning, and planning. The heart characterizes humans first and foremost as rational beings that are susceptible to teaching and learning. The heart pertains to human conduct and action. So let's apply that to a reading from Jeremiah. The reading starts off with God, Yahweh, noting that when people trust in human ways and turn their hearts, meaning their conduct and action, away from God, they curse themselves, ending up hopeless, like stunted vegetation in a desert far from life-sustaining water. In the Bible, turning away from God is the opposite of repenting, which means turning toward God. Turning away from God is more than just missing the mark God aims us at, which is what sin can be understood to be. Intentionally turning away from God is more than a sin. It's evil. It is opposition to the will of God. Which begs the question, what's the will of God? Simply put, in a summary from my Westminster Dictionary of Theological Terms, the will of God is always the highest good. The highest good. Trusting human ways, earthly powers ways especially, has a long history of creating conduct and action that's not good, not godly, nowhere near the highest good. As our lesson's imagery indicates, it's a choice that can turn our lives alone and together, away from the sustaining water of God and goodness, making our lives witheringly hopeless. On the other hand, trusting in God, trusting good, provides the sustaining water of God that gets us through the difficult times of life. Those who trust God are like a tree planted by a stream that, quote, when the heat comes, feels no heat. Its leaves stay green. It is untroubled in the year of drought and never ceases to bear fruit. End quote. It's not that life doesn't deal out heat and droughts to those who trust in God. It's that with God, there's hope that we can get through that. And the selection from Jeremiah ends with God going back to observations about the human heart, our conduct, our actions. First, God notes the human heart is more deceitful than anything else and desperately sick. Who can understand it? And up to this point in the book of Jeremiah, God has expressed disappointment and condemnation about the godless state of things in Judah, with many deceits, false idols, and immorality, replacing God and God's way, and much of it done by political and religious leaders who were in power. That's the heart of human conduct and action that caused God to declare the heart is deceitful and ill-willed. And as much as it pains us to consider this, the heart of human conduct and action today is often still deceitful and ill-willed, led by political and religious leaders in power. Our daily news is full of proof. Top stories this past year repeatedly have included political deceits at high levels about an election and insurrection, the effectiveness of vaccines and masks, and our history toward people of color, most especially Black Americans. The false idol of power in each of those instances has reigned superior to God, to goodness. It's not just politicians. Religious leaders these days have also gone along with such deceit. Some of them, if not in word or by deed, in silence and in action and support, continuing support the wrongdoers. Moreover, the top issues in Christianity, ever since I've been a pastor, have included deceits by religious leaders denying the goodly, godly way LGBTQ+ are made by God, their equality, women's equality, the validity of science, the nature of man-made words in our Bibles, and even what matters most, on Jesus' way. In the final verse of our reading, God sets out the consequences of deceitful and sick hearts. A Yahweh, search into the heart. I probe the mind to give each person what their conduct and actions deserve. Simply put, people reap what they sow. Deceitful-hearted people and others who turn their conduct and action away from God have a natural price to pay. They live without good, which is God. Famous, influential 13th century theologian Thomas Aquinas wrote that they live without rest and real happiness because, quote, nothing can bring the will of humans to rest except universal good. This is not found in any created thing, but only in God. Therefore, our happiness consists in God alone. Sadly, those living without good not only live lesser lives, but also live on in history, remembered through the ages for their lack of goodness. The life that they lead, vibrating in the pages of the history, is, to be blunt, not good. Jeremiah's depiction of God associating human hearts to deceit and ill will in our lesson is, I have to admit, much more than a bit of a lie. The good news, later in Jeremiah, is that God offers hope and a changing of hearts of humans so that each person will know goodness in their heart. The law of God, we are told later, will be written there, and humans will listen to God and be forgiven by God, who will remember their sins no more. God famously says, they will be my people, and I will be their God. I will give them singleness of heart and one way of life, that they may worship me at all times, for their own good and for the good of their children after them. I will make an everlasting covenant with them, and I will never cease in my effort for their good. Christians believe that this hope, that good news offered by God, can be found through Jesus, whom we put in our hearts to try and give us a singleness of heart and one way of life that allows humans to worship God at all times for our own good and for our children's good and for the good of all humankind. Jesus in our hearts is meant to cure us of deceit and ill will and create hearts of care and desire for the well-being of others. We're meant to have hearts that create loving conduct and action, not just towards those we express love to on Valentine's Day, but towards everyone, every day. In other words, for Christians, I heart Jesus ends up meaning I heart everyone. I heart everyone in our words and our